Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Tyson Fury, he's upping his trash game ahead of his fight with Deontay Wilder on December the 1st in Los Angeles, picking apart Deontay Wilder's championship resume, trying to reduce it to dust. You might recall that during the press tour, the Wilder-Fury press tour, the Gypsy King, he actually said Deontay Wilder had fought 39 tomato cans, and Luis Ortiz was effectively the only live body on his record. He's made some new statements to BT Sports, and they are slightly more charitable, but perhaps just dressed up in a different way, but still a withering assessment of Wilder's career nonetheless. So I'm going to get to them for context, and then let's actually examine the respective records, because with Fury's comments, he opens himself up to scrutiny here. And when I read the comments, I immediately thought, Fury may have the biggest scalp on his resume, but Wilder actually has more meat. Well, that was just what I originally thought when I just mentally in my mind thought of their opponents. But let's examine it. Let's go through it. Buckle in. Let's go. So Fury, he stated to BT Sport that Wilder's last 6 fights are the only fights that really count. Stavern, a small heavyweight who was old and finished. Johan Dorper, a Frenchman that has no ability but tries hard. Wilder didn't hurt him once in that fight. Eric Molina, a school teacher who got lucky, took him 9 rounds to get rid of him. Artur Spilka, who lost all his fights by knockout even up until today. A bit of movement and he gave him problems. Gerald Washington, a football player with a bit of a jab, he gave him problems for 5 rounds until he landed. Not a boxer though. Then there was Ortiz, who, forgetting his age, was a good man, but we know father time catches up with everybody. So Tyson Fury statements to BT about Deontay Wilder's resume, and it's not exactly a ringing endorsement of his opponent's resume. I actually sometimes think it's just so self-defeating trying to talk down an opponent's resume, because how can you hope to get the credit that you want everyone to give you by beating that person if you've spent time in the media very publicly talking it down, saying that the guy was garbage? So, if he really believes that Deontay Wilder is that, rubbish, and he's going to beat him that easily, why would anyone want to give him the mega credit that he'll no doubt want if he beats him? And that goes for all fighters. A lot of people get into this trap of doing this, and it just seems so silly. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get to the records now. So, starting with Tyson Fury. So, Tyson Fury, 27-0, 19 knockouts, and 6'9". I'm not really convinced of the height. I think he's slightly shorter than that. Seems to be up on his toes a lot in photos, if you've noticed. If he's in a photo with someone in the gym, and there was recently one with Joe Joyce where there's a mirror in the background, and you can see he's up on his toes. There's gap between his heel and the ground. So whatever he does that for, maybe it's a psychological thing or whatever, I just don't believe he is 6'9", but that's by the by. But going down to the record here, so we'll go down to the bottom. For the first about 8 fights, not much of note here, but then you have, in 2009, he fought John McDermott. Very controversial fight. That was 98-92 to Fury. And this is actually a fight. A lot of people thought McDermott won. It was very controversial at the time. So, in terms of McDermott, British level sort of guy. He was 25-5 by the time that he fought Tyson Fury. But it must be said, Tyson Fury sort of fought a different way in those early years of his career. The sort of, herky-jerky sort of, slick boxer who doesn't get hit. That sort of style evolved later under Peter Fury. But really, until then, so the John McDermott rematch, so he got a knockout in that. But in terms of, is John McDermott really a name here that is comparable to someone on Deontay Wilder's resume? I mean, it's certainly debatable. I mean, some of the guys below championship level that Wilder faced, you probably among that, you might say, is he in line with a Malik Scott or Liakovic or something like that? But if we look at coming here, so Nascimento, so this guy now is certainly regarded as a journeyman. And if you look at his record now, he's 18 wins, 17 losses. So certainly a very different kettle of fish when he fought Tyson Fury. He was undefeated back in 2011. So at the time, this was a prospect of sorts beating another prospect. And then we really have the one that sort of got Tyson Fury a few more eyeballs, really introduced him a bit more to the wider boxing public, as he beat Derek Chisora at that point, an undefeated prospect, 14-0. Nikolai Firtha, he's on the record there, Some of these other guys, they're okay the next 3, but nothing special. Kevin Johnson, and this is a 2012 version of Kevin Johnson, a guy who was actually a relatively decent fighter back in 2012. He wasn't so rinsed like he is now. And that was a clear unanimous decision. Almost a shutout by the look of it here. 12-round unanimous decision. Steve Cunningham, we know he got knocked down in that fight. So if we look at it and go, okay, well, let's count from Johnson, Cunningham, Joey Abel, journeyman, sort of not a bad fighter, but, not on the level of some of Deontay Wilder's championship resume. Derek Chisora again, and this was a very good performance from Tyson Fury. Christian Hammer, obviously Vladimir Klitschko, Sefer Seferi, well, that was a nothing fight. Francesco Pianetta, although Pianetta was a former title challenger, he was so, lackluster and faded and rinsed in that fight. I don't even think we can count that as one of Tyson Fury's best wins because Pianetta was so woeful. But what we really have here, so Vladimir Klitschko, clearly the best name on his record. But at the same time, and this will become important later on, he's saying, Father Time is undefeated for Luis Ortiz. Vladimir Klitschko was 39 at the time. So, there are a number of people that are going around trying to discredit other fighters' best wins, like Ortiz or Klitschko for Joshua, or Klitschko even for Fury, on age. But the thing is, Klitschko here, he had been a unified champion, unbeaten for almost a decade. It's a great win, but it still doesn't take away Klitschko was 39. But signature win, and I believe this is a better win for Tyson Fury than any on Deontay Wilder's resume, by far. But really, it's what do we have after the Klitschko win? And Hammer, he is a solid contender, or had been a solid contender, especially at that point. Derek Chisora, so that's twice. Kevin Johnson, Steve Cunningham. So effectively, in my view, that really is the meat on the resume. So what do we got here? So Klitschko, signature win. Hammer, Chisora, Cunningham, Johnson. So that's 5 guys. Now let's go to Deontay Wilder. So his record is obviously longer than Tyson Fury's because he's had more fights, 40-0 right now. But certainly his prospect phase and, his sort of building up of Deontay Wilder occurred over a similar period, but obviously there's more fights here. But if we look down to the bottom, so effectively, for about the first 20 fights, there really is nothing of note here. Actually, not even 20, maybe 20. I mean, Kelvin Price was an undefeated prospect when Deontay Wilder fought him in 2012, but it's not like he was so highly regarded that everyone thought Kelvin Price was the next big thing. He was a huge guy, 13-0 at the time, and obviously we know he got knocked into next week. When Deontay Wilder fought in the UK, Audley Harrison, Sergey Lyakovich, that's obviously one where Lyakovich was knocked out so badly he's writhing on the ground, quite the famous knockout. We've got Malik Scott, that win. So this is all pre-championship. So some of these, the Harrison, Lyakovich, Further, Scott, they're all okay wins, but they're not in the context of some of these guys weren't really competing for a title at that point. Further and Lyakovich certainly faded, and Harrison as well. Scott, obviously his record looks quite good. He was 36-1-1 when he fought Deontay Wilder, but that was a first-round knockout from the infamous, what people call the Phantom Punch. And I'm not going to wade into that, but certainly I did think that was a curious way that fight ended. Jason Gavin, there's a common misconception here, and I see it wheeled out all the time saying, he fought Jason Gavin in his 32nd fight. But he only fought Gavin as a stay busy because he was waiting for his title shot. He was allowed to have a fight before the title fight, and it was Jason Gavin. It's not like he was searching out Jason Gavin to try have him as his 32nd fight. There is that common misconception out here. Berman Stavern, this was his title fight. It was the first time Wilder was taken 12 rounds. And it was an okay fight, and Deontay Wilder obviously after said, all the doubts are gone now, people need to believe in me. But because, the rest of the record was not really winning people over, a lot of people still had doubts about how good Deontay Wilder was, and those doubts have lingered for years. I mean, it's only really started to go away with the Luis Ortiz win, because the cherry-picking claims were, ringing loudly from fans for several years, even during the championship resume. So anyway, Berman Stavern, and then we have Eric Molina. So Molina, a decent contender, nothing special. Same with Johan Dorper, Artis Spilka, Chris Arreola, Gerald Washington, and then Berman Stavern again. And that, Stavern, he was the mandatory 1 fight in 2 years. Obviously, he looked terrible in that fight. I don't even know if he threw a punch, knocked down 3 times, and clearly he was asleep on the job at the end, taken out. But these other wins, Gerald Washington, it was an okay win. And that was a late replacement opponent, because Andres Wawrzyk was tested dirty for a failed doping test, but Wawrzyk was only going to be the opponent because Wilder wanted a tune-up fight to test his right hand, a surgically repaired right hand. So that had obviously, he'd injured himself in the Arreola fight, tore an arm muscle, hurt his hand. So he wanted to face Wawrzyk. Obviously, the Washington was the end result, but Washington, Arreola, Spilka, Dorper, Molina, Stavern. This is what I like to call, for a championship resume, middling meat. So in the context of his career, if he gets another 2 or 3 really big wins on top, to go with the Ortiz win, these are the sorts of wins that fatten out his record. They're nothing special, but they are solid wins. Solid, but not spectacular. And obviously, they were all voluntaries in terms of Molina, Dorper, Spilka, Arreola, Washington. Not the fights that people really wanted to see, but still, the names, they are decent. They were, decent level contenders. Nothing special, but obviously there's a few other extenuating circumstances, because he would have fought Alexander Povetkin in 2016, but there was obviously the situation with Povetkin and a alleged failed drug test, which there's been a bit of to and fro, court cases, other bits and pieces associated with that. I'm not going to go into that, but the Povetkin fight certainly would have quietened down some of the doubters, some of the haters, had Wilder fought and beat Alexander Povetkin in 2016. But, instead he got Chris Arreola, and then seemingly another soft touch, or soft, I don't want to say soft touch, but compared to some of the names that people wanted Wilder to face, Gerald Washington, he was a 10th ranked in the WBC at that time. It was what it was. It was an in-house fight. And in terms of the level of risk, Washington, some risk, but potentially not as much as others in the division at the time. Obviously, we go further up the record. Luis Ortiz, that is Wilder's best win by far. Ortiz, a good heavyweight, much avoided throughout his career. Certainly, he may not have the record that he would like, because he hasn't got some of the fights he would like, but there's no doubting Luis Ortiz, a very skilled heavyweight, a very good win, a signature win. But when you compare it to Tyson Fury, it certainly doesn't match up at all with Vladimir Klitschko, who was, to that point, 10 years-ish unbeaten, and had beaten all comers. Luis Ortiz certainly doesn't have the same pedigree as Klitschko, so Vladimir Klitschko, clearly a better win to Tyson Fury. But as I say, some of these guys, there's just more names here. There's more on the record for Deontay Wilder. If you just go man for man, even if you go, okay, well, Hammer, Chisora, Johnson, Cunningham, if you say, well, they're basically on the same level or similar to some of these names, there is just more on Wilder's record. So certainly, you can make an argument Deontay Wilder's got the better record. But then again, with the signature win being a better win, you could go, well, that maybe slants it in Fury's way. But certainly, I don't think they're so far apart that Tyson Fury can just be throwing shade at Deontay Wilder's record without actually sort of, getting a bit coming back his way. Because when you look at it, arguably, Deontay Wilder, obviously he's had more fights, and he's got a few more wins on his record. And also, the thing that might throw it in Deontay Wilder's favour is these were championship-level wins. These wins that Tyson Fury had were contender-level wins, as he's coming up prospect to contender level. He never defended his belts. So, there's an argument to be had that Deontay Wilder's got a better record, but certainly you can't take away Tyson Fury has the better win. And this whole thing about 39-year-old Klitschko, 38-year-old Ortiz, can't we just give them both credit? They were both very good wins. What do you make of it all? Who do you think has the better record? Has Tyson Fury kind of sort of shot himself in the foot here a little bit? Has he tried to, by discrediting Wilder's record, open himself up to scrutiny here? Because certainly there's an argument to say Wilder's record is just as good or potentially better, given the depth of some of the contenders in the championship resume that he has. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.